Hi, and welcome to the first in our webinar series for 2022. I'm Nazreen Ibrahim, CEO and founder at NAS Consulting International. We've got viewers joining in from Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So welcome, everyone. Today's session will look at, as you know, trends for 2022 with a focus on e-commerce and social media. I think these things go hand in hand, as you know very well. So it's a great subject to speak about together. Coming up, we've got a great guest. Dr. Alistair Tempest is the CEO at E-Commerce Forum Africa, and he'll be bringing a deep perspective on what is shifting South Africa and Africa, including some practical steps that we'll talk about to help your business understand the roadmap on your e-commerce journey. At this stage, I'd like to say many of you have seen that we've had a second guest, Sinalo Jongola, who is an e-com coach as well as a Shopify expert, scheduled to speak today. I hope he is well. We haven't been able to reach him at all, and he hasn't been gotten onto this webinar this morning. So if you follow him or if you know of his updates, please check in with him to see that everything's okay. We've tried reaching him, but with no success. So we hope everything's going well on his side, and we'll be putting out some tweets if we get in touch with him just to find out that all is well with him. Today, Dr. Alistair and I will be in conversation about the e-com trends. But before we go on, let me tell you a little bit about NAS Consulting International. As a corporate comms and technology business in operation for the last 11 years, we are invested in getting businesses to understand their messaging in the market and using the correct platforms to enhance business communication and process. And we produce great webinars like this too. So keep that for future reference. Enough about us. What about you? Well, you're here today to take away some practical insights from our great guest and to build growing businesses using an e-com platform with a mix of social commerce. You're familiar with that because you've been using potentially a mixture of Facebook page, the Facebook store, and Instagram business profile with an Instagram store. But most popular with shoppers making use of social commerce are WhatsApp catalogs and WhatsApp business accounts. So that's something you're familiar with already. Okay. We're going to start out talking to Alistair about the landscape in SA 2022. And as I've said to you, end off this webinar, which runs for about an hour, around practical steps on what to do next to get an e-commerce business started. We were going to hear from Sinalo about his learnings with using Shopify, and we'll try to get you other perspectives in upcoming webinars so that you can listen to what those platforms for e-commerce look like that you can use in the South African context. Now, before we kick off, special thanks to our social streaming partners, Champion South Africa, Ashraf Garza, who leads that particular initiative. He's an expert communications anchor for radio and television and the Minara Chamber of Commerce. They are based in Durban and Johannesburg, as well as servicing membership in Cape Town. So check out their social presence. Please follow them across their social channels for more interesting updates like this. Okay, first up on the agenda, we've got Alistair Tempest. Dr. Alistair Tempest is the CEO at E-Commerce Forum Africa. He has served as the Director General of the European Advertising Tripartite, was a director at Reader's Digest, and was Director General of the Federation of European Direct Interactive Marketing in Brussels. By the way, Reader's Digest, I think, was a firm favorite for many of us. He also chaired the Self-Regulatory and Consumer Protection Working Party of the Global Dialogue on E-Commerce and was a member of the International Chamber of Commerce's Marketing and Telecoms Commissions for 30 years. Upon moving to South Africa, he was elected as president of the Institute of Interactive and Direct Marketing and became the COO of the Direct Marketing Association of Southern Africa. He sits on various advisory boards such as the International Omni Retailing Markets Association and the Young Entrepreneurs Exchange Program. He has a BA Honours from York University, UK, an MA from the College of Europe, Bruges, and read for his PhD at the University of Kent. And it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Alistair into studio. Dr. Alistair, are you there?
I am indeed. Can you see me? Because we're having a problem with the camera.
I'm sure we'll get you on, but audio is good enough for now. So as soon as we get you onto camera, that will be great. But let's kick off our conversation in any case. And live streaming, I think for many people who've experienced through the lockdown, using different streaming platforms as well as attending webinars, are no strangers to the technical errors that we can find at some stage or the other. So it's all part of a day's work, I would say. Alistair, take us through the mandate for E-Commerce Forum Africa. What is this organization about before we kick off with anything else?
Good. Okay. So the E-Commerce Forum of South Africa was started in 2016. And the whole idea behind it was to try and improve trust. As everyone knows, trust is the key to e-commerce. And there was a lot of worry in those days, particularly, that e-commerce was not developing because people, not just individuals, not just consumers, but also businesses didn't have a trust in the system. So we started then. Our objective is to represent the sector government, and also, most importantly, in fact, at the financial sector, because the financial sector likes to talk to collective bodies of companies, not just to one company. They don't like to negotiate all the issues to do with finance simply with one company.
Yeah. And this is interesting, right? I mean, your organization and your work, Alistair, is it would be primarily from a policy point of view, but also understanding how enabling a better, easier landscape for transactions for businesses, correct?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we also look at how to improve research, for example. I'd like to get back to that in a moment. How to encourage better training, how to encourage better education on e-commerce and on the digital economy in general, because we can't be seen as just an individual part. We're part of a very large body of what is now known sometimes as the fourth industrial revolution. So we are considered to be a part of that. What we use in terms of automated intelligence, for example, in terms of blockchain, in terms of machine learning, all these things which are part of 4IR are also used by people in e-commerce to improve the selling of products, goods and services.
Improve the selling of products. I think that's what the people are constantly focused on, is how do we improve the selling of products, social commerce being a massive part of that. Alistair, before we go on, for everyone who's joined us via LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, welcome to the e-commerce, a focus on e-commerce and social media trends webinar brought to you by NAS Consulting International. And thank you very much to our social stream partners, Champion South Africa, Ashraf Garda, the brand, as well as the Minara Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited to see some of the comments coming through from our viewers tuned in. We had Nicholas Venkana, who said he's glad to join in. Yashmita Bana from the Nika Technology Group also joining us. Thanks everybody for listening in and for viewing and understanding what this important subject's about. Before we move on, just a quick note that we've got some really cool, quick insight videos from business owners who are actually running businesses using social commerce, who joined us today to give us a little bit of insight into who they are and what they do. That's all coming up in the webinar. I'm very excited. We've got 4 of those businesses, and it's going to be really cool to hear from them. Alistair, let's come back to you. We've talked about the mandate of e-commerce forum Africa. Now, in your work so far, you've gone across the breadth of talking policy development with the e-commerce landscape throughout the continent, particularly for South Africa and some of the trends that we look at for 2022 from the research that you've been undertaking. What are some of those elements that come forward?
Well, I think I should also add, Naz, that we are also running the Pan-African E-commerce Association, or E-commerce Africa. So we look at it not just from a South African point of view, but also from a Pan-African point of view, which makes it very interesting indeed. There are enormous developments. Some of them are only to be found in certain countries. Others are very common across the continent. So it's important, I think, to ensure that when we are looking at how e-commerce is developing and how it has developed, in particular over these last 2 years, that we actually consider what else is happening on the continent, which may drive e-commerce forward at a much faster rate than we've even seen previously. So I think that's a very important point. And everyone knows that e-commerce has developed enormously during the COVID pandemic. It's been, if I can say it, the silver lining on the dark clouds of COVID. But compared to the USA, for example, or to Europe, business to consumer e-commerce here in Africa is still very small, extremely small. It's probably around about 2 to 3% of retail trade. In the US and Europe, it's between 25 to 35%. So it's a very, very much bigger thing. You can't compare the two. One of the issues that I mentioned earlier was this issue of research. And one of our greatest ambitions is to try and find the funding for a major independent study on the real size of e-commerce in South Africa. Not just business to consumer, but also business to business, consumer to consumer, which is now known as social commerce, and even e-government too. We mustn't forget that. So the more we know about e-commerce, the more attractive it will be for investment. And I think that's going to be a very key point. If we don't know about investment, if we don't know about our sector, how can we expect investors to come flocking to pay for e-commerce operations? It's very difficult indeed.
Alistair, I think there's one thing that you touched on particularly, which is around very clean research with dedicated and in-depth insights about the true nature of the landscape for e-commerce in South Africa. I mean, there are quite a few reports that have been released recently, one of them being the Social or Digital Insights Report for 2022, looking at social media for South Africa, and produced by We Are Social and Hootsuite. This gives some sort of insight, and I wanted to bring viewers' attention to that, also from the forum's perspective about you talked about the increase or the rate at which e-commerce activity as well as internet connectivity is in Europe, in the UK and the US compared to South Africa. And then stats you talked about compare favorably with what is in this particular report. So that's for sure. I mean, the data is there to suggest in terms of the reach of internet connectivity and capacity that we have in this country. With people using social commerce being then, I think, a driver and a forefront for being able to participate very easily in this particular space. Would that make sense to what you're looking at right now?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm reminded, in fact, I came across a presentation on e-commerce in Ghana, and the speaker said something which really resonated with me. He said, I'm sort of summarizing what he said. He said, today, all that an entrepreneur needs is an attractive product, a social media platform, a payment system, and a delivery system. That's all that
Yes.
you need. And
Yeah.
that is such a big difference from the past, when you needed a bricks and mortar presence, etc., etc., etc. But we can
That's
get back to that in a few moments.
absolutely. The drop shipping component that many people know about, which is not having ownership of any stock, but being able to source and sell quite easily through a very seamless process using an e-commerce platform, is coming on quite well in our country particularly. More so, I think, is looking now at this social report on the e-commerce side from that digital report produced by We Are Social and Hootsuite. Free delivery, so online purchase drivers, free delivery, loyalty points, and easy returns make the top 3 drivers for purchases in this country. If I think about a business, a small from home business using WhatsApp completely, that model is still available to them in, I'm not going to say a restricted form, but in a certain kind of capacity. Do you think this is what differentiates us completely from our other neighboring markets that may be more developed, have access to better delivery systems and the like?
I certainly think it differentiates us from Europe and the US and Canada, the developed e-commerce markets, or indeed from Japan, for example, or Australia. It doesn't differentiate us from, for example, China, or indeed from the other African countries or South American countries. I've always reminded, in 2019, we had an intern here. And this guy, he and his mother used to cook scones and muffins. And they had a WhatsApp group just in the local community. So on a Friday evening, they would get orders in. The mother and son would do the baking, and he would jump on his bicycle during in the morning and bicycle around to all their clients, delivering the scones and muffins. He would take cash, so cash on delivery, COD, and then that would be used, obviously, to buy the materials for the next week, etc., 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 and give them a bit of pocket money during the weekend. And that is the purest form of a small entrepreneur entering into e-commerce. It's e-commerce, definitely e-commerce. He had delivery service, which was his bicycle. He had a payment system, which was his pocketbook, and he had the product which people liked. It's very local. And of course, then comes the problem: how does he scale that, or can he scale that? And
yes.
it does then become quite difficult, because it does require him to have a little bit more money. He needs maybe to employ another bicyclist to be able to sell double amount of products that they're making at the moment. He needs to have maybe he could invest in a Yoco hands held payment system, cash credit card system, etc. But that requires a little bit more money. But what he had was a superb example. I thought it's always an example I use for social commerce.
It's a superb example, and you're absolutely right about that, because I think you've hit on an extremely important point, which is it works well in a certain location. So it's limited by location. If you need to scale your business, what happens then? That's, I think, where a lot of businesses, if they start out understanding, I'll set up an Instagram store, I'll take DMs on Instagram, messages on WhatsApp, collate the orders, make sure I'm always looking at the orders coming through, putting them on an Excel spreadsheet or writing them down manually. When you're scaling, would you say from your research into how South Africans are performing going forward, that they might be a blocker in terms of scaling because of access to the technology, access to funding, access to understanding how to scale this, or can I do it? Or do you think that the main blocker might actually be the distribution or delivery system?
I think it's a mixture of all of them. And it obviously also depends on the product you're selling. So some products are much easier to sell. A service, for example, is a lot perhaps easier to sell than actual goods, because there are a limit on the possibility of delivery of those goods, which is not the case in services. There is again an extremely good and very interesting case study, an organization called BrownSense, which some of the audience may well know. BrownSense is a community, and it has around about 130, 150,000 people who follow it on Facebook. So it's a Facebook page. They reckon that about 35,000 of those community sell something. It can be selling as a plumber, a service like that. It could be service providing knitted goods, whatever it happens to be. It works extremely well. They're now moving from that onto a platform. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they can actually achieve that. One very much hopes so. Or whether they're going to have to work with the two in parallel, a platform and also their social media system. But it's a fantastic way in which, again, a community can get together. And this is obviously not a community in a locality. It covers the whole of South Africa.
I think that's what we do really well in this country, is the power of collaboration through community efforts. And Facebook now, in addition to investing heavily in, as an example, on Instagram, on Reels, they want to push that forward. But they've also made groups a primary function on Facebook, giving in more innovation in terms of how you interact with one another. So your example talks directly to that. Alistair, before we continue our conversation, thanks to everyone tuning in via LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. You're tuned in right now to a live stream of our conversation around trends for 2022, e-commerce and social media focus. Let's hear from one of the businesses that is participating with us in this webinar to talk around how they're using components of social and what it looks like for their business. We'll hear from them now.
Hi everyone, my name is Nozipho Zulu. I'm the owner and founder of Z-Threads, which is a clothing line that is proudly made in South Africa and focuses on garments that are of high quality, classy and elegant. We'd love our customers to have an item that would last them would last the longest time in their wardrobe. So we make sure that we focus on exactly that. Our platforms, our strongest platform is definitely Instagram. We do have TikTok and also have Facebook, but then we realized that Instagram is the best platform for us. One thing that I would advise someone who wants to open an online business is to definitely keep up with the trends, such as your Reels and TikTok, and try to move around where everyone is moving. However, be also strong on the platform that you know that is your best platform. Also collaborate with celebrities and collaborate with the influencers that are well aligned to your brand, that will pass the message that you want to pass. And with that, you'll be successful. Thank you so much.
So it was very interesting to hear from Nozi there. Alistair, you heard her story about how she uses social commerce, which is one of the many examples across South Africa around understanding how they can quickly put together a distribution system, because that's the first thing they think of. How can I get a courier to distribute this or to deliver that in my area? I can actually go and deliver it. I can walk there, I can meet them at a place, or I can drive there. Those are some interesting examples.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we feel that there are probably something between 250,000 and 300,000 sole proprietors, like Nosy there, who are selling on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, and other social media. And by the way, TikTok has now taken over from Facebook, definitely, as one of the major ways. But again, it's horses for courses. If you are thinking of selling, look at the different opportunities that you have, the options that you have. She found that Instagram was the best for her because she needed to illustrate the dresses that she was making. And Instagram is very much involved in the illustration sort of thing. Whereas if you are, let's say, I don't know, a plumber, you might not want to use Instagram. Might be much easier to use WhatsApp or again TikTok. Making sure, and this is always very important, making sure that the photography that you're using is good. And I have come across some examples of photography that you really end up thinking, now, what on earth were they trying to sell? Because I don't see it at all. So you do really have to be careful with that. That's one of the most important things.
I agree on that. I think what I want to say at this stage is we're using the various social platforms as a recipe. And Alistair, you and I talked about this yesterday. There is no one true recipe around how you perform or start out an e-commerce journey or what tools you're going to use. There's a variety of them. And there's multiple things to think about as well. If you want to consider building a very serious e-commerce offering, which becomes a viable enterprise, those areas or elements that many people think of, many people start out thinking, I'll set up a WhatsApp business account, I'll put on an Instagram shop and a Facebook store. And then once you want to scale, it's thinking about if there's a website in place, are you tracking this using analytics and looking at data sources? It becomes so much deeper than that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But that comes as you start to develop. And I think that's really important, that you don't have to start, as we were talking about before, with the guy with the scones and the muffins. You don't have to start that. But as you scale and as you get more and more customers and things like that, it becomes extremely important to have a proper customer relations system in place, for example, so that you can respond. The thing with e-commerce is it's instantaneous selling. So if I want to buy in the middle of the night something for my house, I don't want to be told that, sorry, the website's asleep and you can't buy it. I want to be able to buy it. And I want to have a response, an automatic response, which says, yes, we've received your money, your product will be sent to you as soon as possible. Even better, your product will be sent to you tomorrow, or your product will be sent to you in the morning, whatever it happens to be, to make it automatic, so that the consumer then feels, oh, great, I'm in safe hands here. And I think that comes back to this issue of trust. The one problem that we always have as online selling is, or distance selling, as it used to be called, is the fact that you can't actually talk to the buyer except through internet, through a Zoom meeting or WhatsApp meeting or whatever. And again, that's very important. If you allow your buyers to be able to talk to you, if they have a problem, that they don't feel that you're faceless, and that they've sent their complaint to you, and you just don't care. And that is something that we didn't talk about yesterday, but which is becoming quite worrying. Of course, as e-commerce is being used much more, complaints about e-commerce are increasing. There is the Consumer Goods and Services Ombuds, which looks after our sector and after the retail sector. It was set up by the big retailers. It is a legal body. It has the right to fine, legally, the right to fine, and the right to charge you if they have a case against you. So this ombuds has noted a 300% increase in complaints. All of us in e-commerce, it's our duty, as it were, to ourselves and to our compatriots in e-commerce to be as vigilant as we possibly can on complaints, to make sure
Alistair,
that...
could you give the name of the ombudsman again? I think that's important for people to understand.
It's the Consumer Goods and Services Ombuds.
Consumer Goods Services Ombuds. And they've got a particular focus on e-tailers and e-commerce.
They have their whole thing is retail, anything to do with retail. So it's if you have a problem, let's say you've gone and bought something in Pick and Pay, they would deal with that as well. What they used to, one of the big problems that they used to deal with was airtime, the sale of airtime by by MTN and Vodacom and Cellc, etc. Those were the complaints that they were dealing with mainly before COVID started. Now, their main complaints are sadly about e-commerce. And it's a lot to do with the fact that people are not thinking through their customer relations journey.
Is this just an impact for big business, or is this something that every small business must consider in their calculation?
100%. It's for everyone. Anyone who is selling retail, as it were, whether it's a service or a good. Yeah,
that's really important, right? I mean, you've picked on the core components of what make a starter e-commerce journey. The first is a product or a service. And actually, I do want to come back to that about the difference that South Africans find between selling products and services online. A product or a service, having something to sell, setting up a platform to sell it, a pricing strategy, understanding the customer journey on that path, or whether it's a small situation, very few steps in that journey or quite a long journey. And finally, the distribution mechanism. Now, you talked about the trust. The other side of that coin is the trust that consumers face when using payment systems. So it's quite a few factors to consider. But I think what we're going to take away from here is that start doing the homework early on enough before you scale.
Absolutely. You really need to. E-commerce is a process of many moving parts, and you've got to master those moving parts before you move forward. If you don't
Alistair, would Poppy have an effect? Sorry to cut you there, and before I forget, would Poppy have an effect on small e-commerce players starting out?
Yes, yeah. So POPIA, the protection of personal information, the Consumer Protection Act, the CPA, the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. Those are the main regulations that have that apply to us, and they apply as much to, let's say, Ford selling a large car as to Fred Smith selling biscuits. It's the same rules apply. In the case of Ford, it will get in the newspapers In the case of Fred Smith, it won't get in the newspapers. That's the only difference, probably. But we do have to remember that we do have these laws, and they do apply. And just in case anyone wants to know, there's a lot of rumor around the fact that you need consent if you're going to market to consumers. So people get very worried about that. I need consent before I email someone. I need consent before I telephone someone, etc. That's not the whole story. If you've collected that data, if it's your customer data in what they call in the process of a sale, so you have someone who comes to your website or approaches you on WhatsApp or whatever, and says, I'm interested in buying your product, you can then keep that person's data and sell to them. The only thing you have to remember is you have to provide them, number one, with a right to opt out. So you have to be able to remind them, if you don't want me to contact you, please let me know and I'll take you off my list.
So it's giving consumers an option to choose whether they want to hear from you or not. I think the businesses also want to understand, can I go out and get a database of contacts and just cold call them?
Exactly. And that you cannot, well, cold calling you can still do if it's done by a person without consent. But if you're using, let's say, an automated bot, which is often the case, or if you are emailing someone, if you're SMSing someone, if you're WhatsApping someone, you need their consent, except if you've collected that data in the process of a sale.
Okay, that makes 100% sense. And again, we bring it back to small e-commerce players, whether they're using social commerce as a starter point or an established brand using an actual e-commerce platform with the social commerce integration, it will still apply to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Alistair, before we go on, let's move on to our second customer journey story about how this business owner is using social platforms to get their business up and running and talk to customers through social commerce. Let's hear from them.
Hello everybody, my name is Simone and I am the co-founder of Positive Pants. We are an online e-commerce store which stocks a variety of ladies' apparel, namely activewear, leisurewear, and by far our most popular product would have to be our ladies' leggings. We currently solely run our business on the following social media platforms. We use Instagram and Facebook, which is a great platform if you're starting out in e-commerce because Facebook and Instagram allow you to have your own shop directly on their platform, which means that your customers or potential customers do not have to leave the page in order to go and see what you have available. Should your customer, however, require more detail through the Facebook and Instagram shop, they can be directed straight through to your website where you can have further detail about the products. One of the other platforms we use is WhatsApp marketing, as this is a great benefit for brands. As number one, it comes with zero cost, and number two, it allows you as a brand to have direct contact with that potential customer, meaning if there's any specials you're running, any product launches that you may have, or just needing feedback, you can deal directly with your customer via your own personal WhatsApp group. And our top tip for those who are wanting to enter into the e-commerce space is make sure that you are creating content of value. And how do you do this, you guys might ask? Well, number one, get to know your audience. You cannot be creating content when you have no idea who is it that you are actually speaking to. So have a look at the stats that your social media platforms provide and make sure when you're creating your content that your content is speaking to those people. And number two, create content that is exciting, unique, and original. Remember guys, your social media platforms are there to entertain, to inspire, and to educate your potential clients.
To entertain, to inspire, and to impact your potential client. Those were good words from Simone about the content aspect of e-commerce.
Absolutely, absolutely, and perfectly said. I think that is a very nice example. Now, I was interested because Naz, you picked two women out of the we haven't seen the third. Maybe you will have a third woman. I don't know.
We have a third woman, and we have a fourth person who's a man. So we had to throw in, for effect, we had to throw in a male-owned business as well.
Okay, so there was a study done last year, at the end of last year. I think it was paid for by Facebook, because it certainly promoted Facebook. It was a study done of 8 different countries, including South Africa, on social commerce. And it said a couple of things which I thought were very interesting. Number one, it said those businesses that use social commerce are majority owned by women.
Yes.
Which is very good, because in Africa, as you know, the majority of entrepreneurs are men. So it's a very nice, interesting piece of statistics. The second thing it said was that people who use social media are much more likely to be flexible in how they approach their marketing and how they move their products. That means that they survive longer. Clearly, the more flexible you are, the easier it is to deal with a problem like, for example, COVID. And COVID was, as we all remember, a terrible shock when it first started, and we were locked down, etc., etc., etc. So being flexible when faced with a situation like that, let's hope we never get another one, but any sort of situation, for example, another one might be problems with supply chain. We've had a lot of problems. You mentioned drop shipping. A lot of drop shipping products come from, particularly from China. Supply chain problems can cause very big disruption. So if you are flexible in the way you can deal with your issues of supply chain, you will survive much longer than someone who's not flexible and who hasn't thought out the problems.
Alistair, what you're talking about is, I think, life lessons that have come not only from the lockdown, but they are thrown in as the ongoing trend for 2022 and beyond, is the flexibility, the resilience, and the adaptability of managing in this market. You're taking the tools, you're using them, but the flexibility that the social commerce platforms allows us, and we're talking a lot about social commerce because it's the first point of entry for many businesses wanting to explore e-commerce. And I'm sure your research at the Ecom Forum Africa has shown that as well. You talked about the stat of more women using Facebook as an example than men would. And that too, from the We Are Social Hootsuite report, shows a high percentage of women using Facebook, Instagram in South Africa as opposed to men. It would make sense, right? So I like that these social networks have also acknowledged and realized the capacity to service women entrepreneurs in that particular space and introduce programs for them across the continent. Google has recently introduced their small business initiatives as well to help businesses get on board using Google My Business with simply setting up that profile. It really is about the moving parts, as you talked about, Alistair. If you get them right in the chain, no matter how small or big you are as a business, with location, contact number, good availability for customer service, it really is a stepping stone towards being successful in this space.
Absolutely. Let's move, as we're sort of touching very much on that, into the issue of investment, because it's one of the problems that small companies in particular, whatever they do, are involved in. But I think it's particularly the case for e-commerce. It's difficult to attract investment, particularly if you're a startup company. Um,
Hmm.
Basically, I've been in a number of different presentations where the banks have been involved, and the banks will tell you, don't bother to come to us unless you've got three years of experience, 3 years of bookkeeping behind you.
Yeah.
And then we might think about lending you some money. But if you don't have that, just forget it. And that means that as a young entrepreneur, you've really only got the opportunities of friends and family. Well, some of us have that opportunity, but most of us don't, unfortunately. Crowdsourcing is a possibility nowadays.
Yeah.
Some people are quite successful in that. You've got angel investment, although angel investment in Africa is still very new. It's not so well established as it is in the US or Europe, for example.
Yeah.
And then you've got foreign direct investment. If you're really, looking at something quite big. But because we don't have this data we were talking about earlier, we don't know how big the industry is. It's very difficult for people to actually argue that they are worthy of investment, of being invested in. And that's what separates us from the fintech brigade, because fintechs, by their very nature, are much easier to look at and judge whether or not you would like to invest in them. And many fintechs get invested in, make very large amounts of money, and then invest themselves in new fintechs. So it becomes virtuous circle, whereas we're a bit in the vicious circle at the moment. So one of the things that people do ask us a lot is, how do I get investment? And the answer is, with difficulty. It is very difficult. It's very difficult to be able to get a proper business plan together and find people who will invest. But slowly but surely that is happening. So don't give up hope. It is just a very difficult thing to achieve good investment, and this is not just in South Africa; it's all over Africa,
across the continent. These are two important things you picked on, which I do want to explore more. Just after we've heard from our third business owner, who was delighted when they accepted sharing their story with us. Let's hear from them.
Good day, everyone. My name is Cindy Ndlovu from Okwendalo Naturals. At Okwendalo Naturals, we supply shea butter, black soap, cocoa butter, mango butter, and other organic skincare products. I also formulate my own products, which is glow shea butter, carrot and jojoba oil, and other products that we have. Social media made my life easy when it comes to my small business. It's easy to advertise on social media. It's easy to meet people. We have platforms where we advertise our businesses as small business owners. There are some groups. There's a marketplace on Facebook, because that's where I normally market my business. You can also market on Instagram. You can go to TikTok. You can go to Twitter. It's actually up to you where you're comfortable and where you see that you have a following. So it's actually very easy for me, more than going, maybe to a flea market where you can sit and wait for people. Social media, people can see your ads instantly and they can click on the number, come to your WhatsApp, place their orders, and then I can courier for them or deliver for them wherever we are meeting. So it's much important to have a social media page and be active on social media. I love social media.
Cindy loves social media, Alistair, and we've heard that from the last two business owners. It's so lovely to have you on screen. I know we had an
Yes.
issue there with the camera.
Everyone thought I was a ghost, you know.
We're proving now Alistair is real. Thank you, Alistair. So I have to say to you, Alistair, one of my team members said to us this morning, let me just check in with him again. What he said about how great you looked was you were the, what did you say, Yasin, about Alistair? The cool Santa Claus. That is what you've come to be known as in our team, Alistair. The cool Santa Claus. They love you here, by the way. So just a side note.
Good. I think let's just look a little bit at scaling up. So the other speaker, who unfortunately has disappeared, was going to talk about Shopify, and I think you know, at some point you may well feel, let's move away from social media. Number one, never move away from social media. And social media will continue to be an important part of anyone's journey and a very important part of marketing. So
even with the advent of the metaverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but you may also feel let's have an e-shop of some sort or other, and then you have a lot of options. I mean, Shopify is one. Shopify provides you with a framework. It's like going to a conference, like going to, you know, one of these big trade conferences, and you get the outlines of your stand, and if you're lucky, you get a table as well and a couple of chairs. You don't have to bring them with you, and then on that you put all the different things that you might like to have, your posters or whatever. That's Shopify for you. Shopify also provides you with a payment system, which is very important, and it sometimes provides you, I think, I'm not quite sure, with delivery. I'm a bit out of that because I'm not a Shopify agent, but they do a lot for you, and you pay. I mean, you pay a percentage of your turnover, but fair enough. Or you can go to somewhere like Takealot or one of the other big platforms, depending what you're selling, and you can become what they call a third party seller. And there again, in the case of Takealot, for example, you get the structure of your little shop, as it were. In fact, it's so seamless that you don't even know. It's only when you've bought something that it will tell you this is being supplied by X, Y, and Z company. So you then realize it's not Takealot that you're buying it from, but X, Y, and Z company. The payment system is dealt with by Takealot. Basically, all you have to do is sell, and then you can sit back and smile and get
all the way to the bank.
All the way to the bank, and of course, Takealot takes its pound of flesh for that. So you have to pay Takealot for that, or you can go and set up your own e-commerce shop with WooCommerce, for example, or Magneto. So those are many different ways in which you can scale up and become more visible in some ways. But that does not mean that you still don't have to do marketing. So the thing of social media is you can continue to use social media to sell. You can continue to use social media to create a community. And also at the same time, you can have a third party on Takealot, for example.
It's a case then of deciding when you start out, right? Because in this time when people are coming out of the lockdown hardness that we faced, not only from being restricted from socializing, but moving around our goods and services and just having enough money to transfer as things just closed in on us. It's taking a step back. So for me, I think, Alistair, listening to you and talking about firstly the landscape and what people are experiencing now, is the trend for 2022 is getting firstly a good sense of what business model will work for me, and behind that, how much of marketing am I going to push in order for it to go out. You can do a live video every day. You can put out a post on Facebook every day. If you're not putting some paid spend behind it, the chances of your organic content need to work in a different way, or you're going to use an Instagram reel for that. The point is, and Alistair, what you talked about was understand the business model that will work for you. And that can come in the form of, do I have purely a social commerce roadmap? Will I have a WhatsApp catalog backed by an Instagram shop and people can connect with me? Done. That's the only thing I will do. I'll deliver only in the area around me with a certain radius because I have a car, I have a bicycle, or I have people who can move around with me. That's one. The second is, I want to have a shop because we've had a potential client call us and ask us. He's a hairstylist importing expensive hair products from the UK and Europe, has asked us, you know what, I have a website, it was working initially, had all the info, but how do I transition to a proper e-commerce functionality with a good payment gateway behind it? Now, he's understanding he wants to scale up, but what do we do in that case? And in our conversation with him, we said, well, this is the kind of WordPress theme you have. WooCommerce, as you mentioned, Alistair, will plug in really nicely into that. And PayFast as an option is one of the most trusted payment service providers in the country, will be a really good addition into that whole mix. So you've nicely articulated, Alistair, from the research policy background, but also using real case examples of the business model case here, which I think is the trend in 2022.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's absolutely the case. And wherever you are, from just starting to being pretty well established, 2 or 3 years maybe, you should always have a business model. It's good business to have a business model.
Business to have a good business model, that's for sure.
If you don't, you can muddle along. But if you have one, then you have these stages that you can see that you're going to go through. And as you go through those stages, you take that out of the business model and put in new ones, so that you're constantly looking at it as a business. It's the one thing I think we have to say about e-commerce is that it's not for lazy people. It really is not for lazy people. It's not a city paved with gold. You have to work, and if you do work hard at it, then you will achieve things. There are a number of courses as well that you can do. One of my board members is the head of Insaka Academy. Insaka Academy offers free and also paid for courses in e-commerce. Fantastic. Be able to go and refresh your thoughts on different things with other people who are in the same. I'm sure that
viewers across the social platforms tuning in are keen to head on over to the e-commerce Africa Forum Africa website. You will find the details there on what Alistair's talking around, particularly in Insaka Academy, to get more free information on those courses. Alistair, you talked about it's not for lazy people. Indeed, it isn't. And our last customer story is from a person who I know, him and his family. They work incredibly hard daily, sourcing products where they can, from whoever they can, pricing, marketing on WhatsApp. Let's hear from him.
How's it, everyone? My name is Nick. I'm from a company called Imivuzo Partners at Opportunities. You may have heard of us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and our main platform that we use for our business is WhatsApp. So we've started our business from home. We run solely from home. All our stock is kept there. All our sales are done through there. We have systems in place, thankfully, and we are now working on a whole new level compared to where we started. So one advice I can give you is be resilient, never give up, always keep trying, and there's always opportunities out there for you. Thank you and God bless. Take care.
Yeah, so Alistair, you heard there from Nick, who's running purely through WhatsApp.
Good, yeah. Let's look at one thing that is quite not spoken about very much, and that is business to business. So we tend to look at business to consumer. It's the in the iceberg. It's the bit of the iceberg that you can see.
I think we've got a lag with Alistair coming through. Alistair, are you still there?
Business to business, of course, is under the water, hidden. Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying, okay, good. So let's look a little bit at business to business. It's the bottom of the iceberg, the hidden bit of the iceberg of e-commerce. We're all the bit of the iceberg is in some countries at least 2/3 of the size of business to consumer is 1/3 of the size of e-commerce, and business to business is 2/3. For example, in Germany, I was having a talk to my German colleagues. That's how they consider business to business. So business to business is extremely important, and it is something that traditionally has been done through agents, etc. It's becoming more and more, obviously, digitalized, more and more e-commerce orientated, and that is making it very exciting at the moment. So anyone who's interested in business to business, and that can be anything from selling car spare parts to garages, to catering equipment for restaurants, etc., etc., etc. Maybe that's not quite such a good one nowadays, but anything where you are selling to a business. What we as we talked about this yesterday, what we're seeing in Africa today is the beginning of the African Free Trade Area, the CFTA as it's called. The African Free Trade Area is extremely interesting, particularly because what's happening is that the regulators, the politicians, have suddenly realized that Africa's growing at an enormous rate in population. We are, I think it's the Chinese have the most people in the world. On the Indian subcontinent, second lot, second size, and in Africa we're the third largest with 1.3 billion people today. The average Africa is 19. The average age in India is 29, and the average age in China is 35. So we're going to catch up very quickly with those other two continents. And then the question is, how do we employ people? Where on earth do we find enough jobs for all those people? The answer is by trying to create our own manufacturing. If we're going to create our own manufacturing, then we need more trade between the countries of Africa. Only 16. Sorry.
Alistair, yesterday you talked about Africa. We were having a brief conversation about the African Free Trade Agreement, and part of that initiative is a seamless payment gateway that's been released about a month ago called PAPS.
Yeah.
We were talking about that very briefly, but do you think PAPS is the second layer onto existing payment gateways that will really help small businesses transcend what will be also a buy now, pay later sort of avenue?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are many challenges to the African Free Trade Area. We can't be blind to that at all. But a payment system was one of the biggest ones that we didn't have. A lot of countries, their central banks create enormous problems for remuneration remittance rather of funding from one country to another, making it very difficult to trade across frontiers. And in particular, it was very expensive as well. So you got this thing where banks were taking very large amounts of commission for payments across frontiers. Currency fluctuation could be a real killer, because obviously if your currency, like Zim, for example, in the old days, your currency goes through the roof, then there's a really serious problem. You can't do business with that country. So all sorts of things were making it very difficult. PAPS, which is Pan-African Payments and Settlements Service, I think, is a way to build on that, to just remove the many barriers that we have already. There are other ones too. I mean, on the regional level, in SADC, for example, the banks have all got together and they're creating a new system, which is going to be a lot cheaper. The commission rate is going to be a lot cheaper. And it's designed really for informal traders, to allow informal traders to trade across frontiers and to be banked as they do that. So the SADC is just coming out with that system. It will be ready, I think, by middle of this year. And there are other systems also in place or coming along. But perhaps is overall, it's a Pan-African system. It won't mean, of course, that transport infrastructure will be solved. That's still going to be a big problem. But the African Free Trade Area is going customs duties, and they're trying to remove customs duties between African countries. It's going to look at the way in which transport moves through borders. The East African community has done a fantastic job. It used to take apparently something like 12 hours to move a lorry through from Rwanda to Kenya, for example. It's now only takes 30 minutes. 30 minutes. And they've also cut down the corruption as well, because they use blockchain systems which identify exactly as you come into, as your lorry comes into the customs,
yeah,
who is the customs official who's dealing with you, and how that process goes through. So the customs official no longer has the ability to say, give us a little something on the side, because they will immediately customs official. So all these sorts of things are happening thanks to digitalization. And that's why I said at the beginning that when we look at e-commerce, we can't just look at e-commerce. We are part of the digital economy, and a very important part of that digital economy.
Part of the digital economy. As you end on that note, Alistair, top 3 things businesses should remember in South Africa to start out a successful e-commerce roadmap.
Number 1, a good product. Have a good product. You know, many people sell the same product. If you're going to sell the same product, make sure that your product is better than anyone else's. But look for products. There are so many millions of different products of different sorts. Look for one which you feel that you can be a real expert in. So that's number one. The second thing is make sure that you use all the facilities that you have in order to market your product. And that means WhatsApp groups, it means Facebook groups, etc., etc., etc. Create communities. Get your friends to like you, and that helps a lot because it pushes you up in the ranking, the SEO system. So get your friends to like you, and thirdly, make sure that you have a good customer facing relationship. Don't think. A very good example of that would be during the problems that we had last year, where supply chains started to fall apart. You got two reactions. The first one was, oh gosh, I haven't got the products I'm trying to sell. I'm writing to all my customers to say either please don't buy anything for the moment, or buy, but we will take a bit of time. Sorry about that. It's going to take us a week. It's going to take us 2 weeks to deliver rather than immediately. The second reaction was the bad one, which is, oh, well, we'll just let them pay, and then sometime when we get the product, we'll send it. Sometime. Yeah. And then the seller is sitting there, a buyer is sitting there thinking, am I going to get that product? And then they come to me and say, I bought a product from X, Y, and Z, and they haven't delivered it. And I then say, well, go to the Consumer Ombudsman, the Consumer Goods and Services Ombuds, and make a complaint, because I can't do more than that.
And this is what Nola is so good on a daily basis.
Yeah. So it's really this customer way that you have to think. You have to think always like that. David Ogilvy, the great advertising agency guy, once said, if he got very angry with a copywriter who produced a piece of real rubbish. So he said, if you showed that to your mother, what would she think? So the copywriter said, well, yeah, she wouldn't really understand it. So he said, exactly. That is exact secret of marketing. Show it to your mother. If she doesn't understand it, take it away, take it apart, put it together, show it to your mother. Once you've got her to understand what it is that you're trying to sell, then you're okay.
Then I'm doing something right, Alistair. I show my mother pieces of content we do. She is generally getting it, so it's working. Seems to be working so far. So keep that in mind. Alistair, what a pleasure having you on today's first webinar of our series that will run for this year. I know you're going to be on for quite a few of them in the rest of the series. Your top 3 tips: have a good product, make sure you're building community, and have a good customer relationship management going on. It was a pleasure to have you on here, and I hope we see you again.
Yes, I hope you see me again rather than a blank screen. I'm sorry about that. Something wrong with my
computer. It will go much smoother the next time. Alistair, take care, and we'll be in touch very soon. That was Alistair Tempest, the CEO at E-Commerce Forum Africa. It was wonderful to hear his perspective from the landscape research policy point of view, because it's really important to understand the market itself. You understand the movements in the market, and this is what we're doing as we're building our businesses, big or small. The first day you sell a product is the day you're in business. So no matter how big or small your business is, it's a business, and you've got to understand the movements in the market. We talked today quite a lot about various components of e-commerce. So let's take a look at some of the key learnings that we've been able to take away from this session today. This is interesting because if you look at what Alistair was talking about, distribution, using social commerce versus scaling up to using an actual platform, some of the key learnings you can take away. What do you need as an entrepreneur to start out? An attractive product, a delivery system, social media platform, payment system. I'm just looking through these very quickly, but this will be available on our website to download. You can also get a copy on our social media channels. Just save it on to your gallery on your phones, distribute, and just have a look at it every time you need to think back on what some of the key pointers or learnings are around maintaining a successful social media or e-commerce roadmap. How to make your startup successful? Well, keep up with the trends. Maximize on the platforms that fits your business best. That's really important. The importance of a customer relationship system, and be aware of how customers place a complaint. We all know about Hello Peter. We all know about Google reviews, WhatsApp messages that go around and get viral, whether they're videos or they're screenshots. We know the drill. There's the consumer ombuds that Alistair talked about. We have various platforms that we need to be aware of. Again, it comes back to market research. Now, there's so many things to talk about when it comes to our key learnings, and thank you very much for showing up the key learnings to the technical team. You can get a copy of this on our website, as I've said, or check out our social media channels to get a copy. We also have some interesting resources that will be available in the coming week. So head on over to nasconsulting.co.za or follow us on our social media channels for those updates that are coming up. I hope you were able to take away something of value from today's session. It's important for us to have this conversation because, well, social commerce, the mobile phone, and an internet connection are truly the way of business these days. It's what you're doing to survive and to thrive in this economy, especially since we've come out of lockdown and we've just gone through the most incredible period in humanity as we know it for now in this period of history, which is COVID-19. I hope you've taken away something and you also share it with your friends and your network. A special thank you to our social stream partners, Champion South Africa, Ashraf Garda, who is the leader behind Champion South Africa, as well as the Minaro Chamber of Commerce. And in our next webinar, we hope to have more of our social stream partners we can share with you. Right. You've enjoyed this one. We haven't even scratched the surface, I would say, of what e-commerce is about, but we're sure going to continue the conversation in March. Now, in March, we've got interesting conversation coming up, focusing on payment systems. And in our, as we end off, you will check out the details coming up on screen. I'm Nazreen Ibrahim. Thank you so much for joining us. You can always leave a comment on our social media channels or get in touch with us. Contact at nasconsulting.co.za and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you. That's it from us. Ciao for now, and we'll see you at our next webinar.